All right, well, welcome to our third study in our Kingdom Outpost in the book of Esther. And so today we are going back to what we started with in that very first lesson, talking about stories. And this is just kind of a fun place to start as we're introduced to Esther, with these two themes of tragedy and comedy, which, if you've ever seen those masks in the top right hand corner of the screen, is kind of portray the two different types of stories there are out there, a comedy and a tragedy. And when we think about those things, and this is just where we're going to start with the group, is just thinking about these two different kinds of stories. And a comedy is not in the classic ha-ha funny kind of Adam Sandler type comedy, but these two types of stories. A comedy is where you have a character who starts out low and is exalted and raised high and is given something great. And then a tragedy is the exact opposite of that. You've got a character who starts out really high and is brought low. And typically in most stories, you have kind of elements of both of those. Think about Cinderella as the example I gave in the outline of course, Cinderella starts out really low and she's exalted, but the stepsisters are the exact opposite. But usually, in most stories, one or the other is the focus. If you think about like Titanic, of course, you've got all these rich people on a boat, and of course, the boat sinks. So we would definitely call that one a tragedy. And then if you think about other stories, you might think about like rags to riches type stories and things like that, and those would be your comedies, where you've got a character who starts out with humble beginnings and they're exalted. And so think through these things, and again, this is a good time with your group to just have some fun discussions about different stories that you've read and different movies that you've watched, and which ones falls into which category, and which one moves you the most, which one do you like the most. I have a feeling that most people will like the feel-good comedy stories, but maybe other people don't. Other people may be drawn to more of the reality of the tragedy stories. So just think through those things and talk through them as a group. And then as we turn that page, thinking again about that big picture story of redemption that God is telling throughout Scripture, would you call it a comedy or would you call it a tragedy? And of course, the easy answer is there's some of both in there, but the overall picture, if you had to pick one or the other, would you call it a comedy or would you call it a tragedy? And the book of Esther is going to give us a hint about which one it's going to be classified as. So that's just kind of forms the background before we even meet Esther. Just a fun place to jump into, again, the story elements that we find in the book of Esther. So when we talk about Esther, we talked last lesson about Artaxerxes and how he was really a bad king. Esther is brought into the story because Vashti was kicked out. And now we have this beauty contest that Esther is a part of to become the new queen. And I kind of tongue-in-cheek put the Hunger Games quote in here because the odds are definitely not in Esther's favor. You're talking about women from 127 different provinces. The fact that Esther is Jewish may immediately disqualify her, and that's probably why her uncle tells her to hide the fact that she's Jewish. And so the odds are long that she'll become the new queen. Of course, we've read the book and we know that she is going to become the new queen. And that's going to lead us into this discussion about God granting Esther favor. And favor is one of those Christian words that's been hijacked in the last couple of decades. To when you say that God grants favor, a lot of people will have pictures in their minds of riches and, a Cadillac or a Mercedes and a big house and, blessed and highly favored or something along those lines. And the book of Esther is really going to show us that that's that's not the case. In fact, as this unfolds more and more, Esther is going to be put in more and more dangerous spots where she's going to have to risk her life. And so we really want to drive home with the group the fact that God's favor is putting Esther in a place where he can use her for his kingdom, that he is putting her in a place where she can be a part of his big picture, a part of his deliverance, a part of his plan. And that favor is just over and over and over shown in Esther being put where she is. Right off the bat, she's given in this beauty contest, she's given the favor of Haggai, which is the man in charge of taking care of the women. And he gives her the best of the best, and probably the most valuable things is he gives her the advice on what the king likes. And so she's given a step up in that. And then we're told that she's given favor in the eyes of all who saw her. And then finally, she's given, of course, the king's favor. And the reason for that is because God is putting her in a place where he can use her. And of course, this is a good connecting point with the people in your group, that if God is granting you favor and he is putting you in different places, and he's putting you in a job or a neighborhood or in a certain group, and he's helping you gain favor in other people's eyes, it is not so that you can get something yourself out of that. And in fact, it may cost you something in the end to follow God in that, but he's putting you in those positions because he has a plan for you. And it's ironic that the book of Esther is one of the few books in scripture where God's name is not once mentioned. Never is God's name mentioned in the book of Esther, but we can see really, really clearly that God is orchestrating everything behind the scenes, and that it's no coincidence, it's no luck, it's no chance that Esther is made the queen. Everything is happening for a reason, and that reason is going to unfold as the story of Esther unfolds. So just talk about that for a little bit, about why God grants us favor, so that he can use us for his kingdom. And of course, the ultimate favor is that Esther wins the favor of the king, and she becomes the queen, and the orphan exile is given a kingdom. She becomes the queen. And so that gives us a hint back to what we were originally talking about, is God telling the story of a tragedy or a comedy. And it's pretty clear from the book of Esther, when this orphan becomes the queen, that God is telling a story of redemption, and he's telling a story of bringing the low high, and he's making the many who are last who will be first. And our memory verse is this just wonderful summary of all that, of when Jesus is talking and he says it's God's delight to give his little flock a kingdom. And I love how Jesus calls the church his little flock. There's so much affection in that he's calling us his little flock, and it's his delight to give us a kingdom. And as you connect that in your group with where everyone is at, it's just important to remember that that's what God is doing for all of us, no matter what position we're in. I mean, most of us probably won't win any beauty contest to become queen. I certainly don't think I will. But God has put us all where he has put us for a reason, and he is showing us favor for a reason, and he is lavishing his riches on us so that we can serve in his kingdom, and we can be a part of the work that he is doing to bring healing to the world and to bring his new creation to bear. So drive that home with your group, connect that God is telling that story, and that we're all a part of that.